Hello, everybody. This is Gary Matheny. Thank you for joining me today for Liberty Observatory, the undiluted, unedited opinion page relating to life's stories and the subject of liberty and God. If you would like to like and subscribe, please do so. Greatly appreciated. Today's topic is going to be memories of my mother. My mother was born on August 12th, 1922, and she died on June 2nd, 2012. She was 89 years old when she passed away. Her birth name was Anna Virginia Frances Schmidt. Of course, that's German. And interestingly enough, she spent most of her adult life thinking that she was A-N-N-E, Virginia Frances Schmidt, Annie or Anne, with the E being silent. It wasn't until, her 60s, she got a copy of her birth certificate, and there was the A-N-N-A Virginia Frances Schmidt. She was born in South St. Louis in a German community. And if you think of St. Louis back in the day, there was a street called Delmar. And when St. Louis was neighborhood oriented, you had certain congregations of ethnicity in various parts of the city. So South St. Louis was tremendously German. There was a huge German population in St. Louis, and if you go to certain sectors of South St. Louis today, you'll find Germanists still there. You'll find restaurants and other Germany-related type of institutions, like Lutheran churches. And then you also had the Catholic Irish, and they were in a section called Dogtown, which was south of highway or south of Delmar. Then you had probably the most famous ethnic neighborhood in St. Louis, and that's the Hill. And that is the Italian community in St. Louis. In fact, I heard someone say, a few months ago, that the most intact Italian neighborhood in the United States is the Hill in St. Louis. It is truly a St. Louis treasure, has many and various Italian attributes, especially good Italian restaurants. So if you ever make it to St. Louis, go to the Hill. And so when my mother was growing up, you didn't generally go north of Delmar. The ethnic group south of Delmar stayed south of Delmar. And my mom was about 20 years old, so it was probably in the early 40s that she went north of Delmar. Up to that time, she had her German community, and she stayed in that German community. North of Delmar, St. Louis had the old Scot-Irish rabble-routers, the Protestant Irish, north of Delmar. And then you also had the black community. And so they were kind of like the social outcasts of St. Louis culture. And so, anyhow, my mom went to grade school in South St. Louis and had a public education. And at that time, you got to remember, this is like the late 1930s. At that time, when kids finished the 8th grade, they were given the choice of either going to high school or going to work. And a lot of kids, even though they were in their early teens, adolescence basically, opted to work. They wanted jobs. They wanted to earn a living. They wanted to grow up. And so probably the majority of the people that my mom associated with in South St. Louis opted not to go to high school. There was no social stigma associated with not going to high school. My mom's first job as a young person was that she was a waitress at a Chinese restaurant. And she loved Chinese food. And but she was also very particular about it. It had to be good Chinese food. Now, she didn't get a chance to eat as much Chinese food as I think she would have liked, because I had an older sister that was very health conscious. And, she tried to restrict Mom's MSG, which I think is salt on steroids. And so she didn't eat Chinese food a whole lot. But I remember one time a few years before she died, I took her out to lunch, and I took her to a Chinese restaurant because she didn't really have the opportunity to go that often, and I knew she liked Chinese, and so I took her to a Chinese restaurant. And guess what? She didn't like it. It wasn't as good as the Chinese food that she had become accustomed to as a young person. So good intentions were there, but oh well, she didn't like it very much, and that's the last time I took her to a Chinese restaurant. Well, in the 40s, my mom married Ralph Beloit Matheny, and Ralph, my dad, died in 1991, and so my mom had about another 20 years to live after my father's death. And so the question is, what are the favorite memories of my mom? Well, I want you to understand, first and foremost, my mom had a servant's heart. She was put together in such a way that she liked to help people. I'll give you one story. When she was living in North St. Louis County near the airport, when it became heavily integrated, and basically this is before she went to assisted living, but she had lots and lots of black neighbors, and of course black children. And she would give candy to the children, and every once in a while give them $1 to the neighborhood kids. She was happy to do it. And I remember when my mom died in 2012, at her funeral, I made this remark in her eulogy that my mom did more to help race relations in this country than 1,000 protests. Well, that raised some eyebrows. But there is something to be said when you seek peace and common ground and kindness towards all others. You can look past issues like race, ethnicity, and religion and see the human being and be kind to them and be respectful to them. And that's the way my mom was, and that was the way she lived her life. Well, some specific memories. So we're going to go back to the late 1950s. This is preschool for me. I remember my mom reading the book Black Beauty. That was about a horse and who had been mistreated and eventually wound up in a good place. And so my mom reading Black Beauty to me when I was 3, 4, 5 years old stuck with me. And so I always tell parents that you should read to your children. Don't miss out on reading to your children, because some of the things that you read to them, it's not just the subject matter, it's the fact that you spend time and care and attention with your small child and read to them. So that was a very good memory. One of the most unusual memories was a memory around 1960. So I'm 7 or 8 years old. We didn't take many family vacations at that time. Probably about every other year we did a family vacation. My dad had a late model Chrysler Rambler. I guess it was a Dodge Rambler. It was a station wagon. And it was before the era of air conditioning. And so we were driving down to Roaring River State Park in southwest Missouri on these country highways to spend a few days at a cabin there. Great fun. And so we're driving down there, and my dad was a man of purpose, a man of goal, a man of destination. My mom had a summer cap on. I think it was made out of the corn, the farmer's hat type thing, and it had a pretty big brim on it. And so basically, it flew off her head due to the, driving down the highway with the window open. But it blew off of her head and blew all the way through the car and blew out of the back window, because in that particular Rambler, you could open up the back window. You could roll down the back window, the very back window, and let your vehicle cool. If you're inside, you want a cooler vehicle, so open everything up. That's the way things were back then. It blew completely out of the car, and my dad would not stop to pick up the hat. And my mom was fuming about that he would not turn around to get her hat. And so that's just an illustration of my mom and dad's relationship. He definitely was the boss of the family, but my mom had such a servant's heart that she just wanted to help her family, her children, her husband, and didn't really complain about dynamic of the relationship. Another thing that I remember, this gives you an indication of how caring and servant-minded my mother was. Because when I was in high school, I would go to high school like 7 to 3 or whatever. Then I would come home, change clothes, and I worked a half a shift at a local factory from 4 to 8. And so, pretty busy day, but I was a high schooler and I had plenty of energy and didn't even think about how busy that day was. But anyhow, I'd go to this factory, local factory, work from 4 to 8, then I'd come home. And my mom always had dinner on a hot plate for me. So I would come home, and I just wouldn't, search through the refrigerator or, go through the cabinet, the food cabinet, try and figure out what to eat. There was always something there for me. And my mom made a lot of tacos. I was a taco eating boy. And so she would have tacos made up for me on the hot plate when I would come home from work. And so that's the way she was, and that's the way she cared for her family. And I also remember my mom's dying request. She was in the hospital in St. Louis County, and she was 89 years old, and it was apparent that she was in the process of dying. Their organs were breaking down, and so I remember her request was, "I want to go to heaven. I want to go to heaven." And we prayed that she would go to heaven, that the windows of heaven would be open up, and that she would enter the presence of God Almighty through faith in Jesus Christ. So my mom was a good woman who cared about people and took care of this boy. So I'm so appreciative of her and so thankful for all the good things that she did with me, or for me. And so I'm also thankful I have the opportunity on this podcast to talk about my mother, because she should be remembered. And millions of other women like her who served their family, cared about their family, should also be well remembered. Thank you very much, and we shall see you next time.